presented here.
Huh?
That's good to know. So we'll have next month, March 8th, David Steele will be talking about books and ag drugstores. And if you're old enough and you're from here, those names mean something. And then Fran Reigler, who is a teacher of German, will talk about the pioneer Schramm family of Hancock County, because he wrote published letters, long published letters in the 1830s, back to his relatives in Germany, explaining how really awful everything was here because there were so many trees and no roads. Anyway, it's a very interesting program. Then Michael Brown of the Indiana Jewish Historical Society on May 10th will present on early German synagogues of Indiana. And then on June 14th, Ron Flick, who's an architect, recently visited Berlin, and he's going to give us his perspectives on the former Reichshauptstadt of Berlin. And Indiana German Heritage Society is a educational organization dedicated to discovery, appreciation, study, and sharing Indiana's rich German heritage. And it is very rich and broad and deep because we've been here since before statehood and had an impact then on the history of the state. If you are not a member, as they say at PBS, please join. And we have this program already brochure, if you'd be so kind. Take one and join, please belong. Yeah, join and belong. That's right. That's right. And the other thing is we have a short stack of German Life magazines right there on the table behind you. Feel free to take one. It's a fun magazine, everything from genealogy to recipes to travel and history. Now, on to our speaker tonight. Our speaker tonight is Ilsa Davies. Ilsa Davies is a native of the city of Halle. Sorry? And the city of Halle, then is in Sachsen-Anhalt state, which was formerly part of the, in the good old bad old days of the Cold War, it was part of the DDR, the German Democratic Republic. But her family then left the East and settled in Minden in Westphalia. And then she immigrated, married a very nice US soldier, and immigrated following her marriage to the United States. And then also, when he had another tour of duty in Germany, she lived in Frankfurt am Main, not Oder. And she then earned her bachelor's and master's degrees at the University of Utah, and subsequently taught middle and high school classes, both in French and in German, and capable of Russian as well, in a pinch, right? You know, things have gone bad in the Cold War, you know, that's a good insurance policy. She transferred to Indiana, resulted in her career change. She worked for Boehringer Ingelheim, and which was now called Roche Diagnostics, and managed their customer and visit program. She is now retired and lives on a farm in Shelby County. I'm going to introduce you then and turn this over to my friend Inga, and she's going to educate us all about the illustrious career of one of my heroes, Bruno Schmitz.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I am a native German, as I'm sure you will instantly detect. I have a little accent. My full first name is Ingeborg, spelled I-N-G-E-B-U-R-G, which is about as German as you can get. In Scandinavia, that name is also existing, but if you are from Scandinavia and your name is Ingeborg, no, it will be Ingeborg, B-O-R-G. So that's how you can tell. Mine is Ingeborg, but for the American palate, that is a little too much. I've shortened it to Inge. And tonight, I got yet another name. Very nice, I like that. So, good evening, welcome. This is the first Stammtisch in 2023. And I also would like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to present on Bruno Schmitz. And if you have not heard that name before, let me assure you that you are not alone. You're actually kind of with me because I never heard that name while I lived in Germany. I heard it for the first time after I moved to Indianapolis. I have seen all but one of his major monuments, which I will introduce. There's one located here in Indiana and the others are in Germany. So I take it that maybe you have not had a chance to see the ones in Germany because they're a little too far away. And putting this presentation together has been an interesting journey of discovery for me. And it also allowed me to find some personal connections to some of Bruno Schmitz's work. And before I get started, I need to acknowledge Bill Zell, who introduced me so nicely. He's an expert on this, and Bill helped me very much with this presentation. So thank you, Bill, for your guidance and for your help. I'm not sure what my presentation would have been like without his help. So, and also if I say something which doesn't make sense, please interrupt me. I don't mind that at all. When you look at this monument, I'm sure everybody who lives in Indiana will instantly recognize this structure as either Circle Center Monument or Soldiers and Sailors Monument. I saw it for the first time when I came to Indiana, but most people don't really know a whole lot about this monument, other than every year it turns into the world's largest Christmas tree. When lights are strung from the top to the bottom in December of every year. When I came to Indiana, I signed up for a city tour. And that's when I saw that monument, and it was the highlight of the tour. I very much liked it. I liked it for two reasons. Number one, most European cities, big cities, have a center of town, kind of with fancy and very imposing structures. And I also liked it because it looked strangely familiar. You know, something I might have seen somewhere else, and I couldn't make the connection at the time. And in addition, the tour guide mentioned this monument was designed by a German architect whose name is Bruno Schmitz. And became instantly curious to find out more who he was, what this monument stands for, and also what the German connection is. I didn't ask, can you hear me? I tend to speak fairly loud, much to the disappointment of sometimes my children who say that's embarrassing, tone it down. So, I was curious almost immediately, and the goal of my presentation today is to shed a little light on the monument and on the person who designed it, and to find out about more about the German connection. Okay, Travis, I may need your help. Does not advance. It's modern technology. That's the right touch, which I don't have, I think. Us.
Where's my mouse?
One before, please.
Good.
That's it.
Okay, just use the arrows. I don't know where my mouse went.
So who was Bruno Schmitz? He was a German artist, architect, and designer of monuments, born in Düsseldorf on the 21st of November, 1858. He died in Berlin on the 27th of April, 1916. He was a student at the Düsseldorf Kunstakademie or Art Academy from 1874 to 1878. And he's best known as the designer of the 4 largest German memorials. But he also made other contributions, and I will get into all of that in my presentation. Early success came when Bruno Schmitz won a prize for a design of a monument in Rome, Italy, the Victor Emmanuel Monument, but he did not get to execute that design. The breakthrough actually came in 1887 when he entered the contest for the design of the Indianapolis Soldiers and Sailors Monument, and he won first prize and was awarded with the execution of that monument. He was not quite 30 years old at that time. And when he was notified that he had won, he came to Indianapolis and lived here for a while as the guest of an immigrant, a fellow German, who was then the treasurer of the Indiana state government, a gentleman by the name of Julius Augustus Lemke. And Mr. Lemke was a lifesaver for Bruno Schmitz, because in those days, nowadays we would assume that everybody speaks German, speaks English, which is just about reality. But Bruno Schmitz spoke no English. So communication would have been very difficult had it not been for Secretary Lemke's volunteering his interpretation skills. Bruno Schmitz brought with him an architect, and the architect force, as he was not an architect, he was an artist and did the sculptures, ended up doing the sculptures on the monument. He was from Austria and his name was Rudolf Schwarz. This was a tremendous opportunity for Bruno Schmitz. It kind of started his career. And when he went back to Germany, he moved to Berlin and soon became Berlin the capital of Germany, and soon became the favorite designer of colossal monuments during the reign of Kaiser Wilhelm II. The Kaiser frequently visited Bruno Schmitz's studio and very much liked his work. His personal life seems to have been a little tumultuous. Bruno Schmitz was married twice, had 2 daughters, but his first marriage ended in scandal and divorce when a friend of his had an affair with the wife of Bruno Schmitz. And in those days, I also need to add, that was a scandal. Nowadays, we are a little more used to things happening that are out of the ordinary, perhaps, but then that was a terrible scandal. It really tarnished his reputation. Travis? I'll try. Yeah, it worked. So this is the first monument which Bruno Schmitz designed, and you will recognize it. It's our own monument here. This monument was initially intended to just honor the veterans, the Hoosier veterans of the Civil War. Indiana was a Union station, a Union state, as you may know, during the Civil War. And Indiana contributed almost 200,000 sailors and soldiers to the war effort. which represented 75% roughly of the citizens who were capable of bearing arms. And after the war, the veterans, large veterans population here in Indiana clamored, of course, for a monument, and they became a major political force. And in 1887, there was a veterans reunion in Indianapolis, which led to the formation of a commission and ultimately to the signing of a bill by the Indiana state government and appropriation of $200,000 for this monument. This later on, it was extended. This monument honors all veterans or veterans of all wars and not just the Civil War. The monument is made out of Indiana limestone, as you know. It is surrounded by pools and fountains, stone steps, and terraces. The names of soldiers are carved into stone tablets above the massive entry doors. And this was the first monument in the United States to be dedicated to just the common soldier. This monument does not honor a general officer or a president or some important person, just the common soldier. There are 4 massive limestone groupings, as I alluded, corner statues representing the then military branches of the armed forces. And there is a 30-foot bronze victory statue at the very top, which was not designed by Bruno Schmitz, but by a gentleman with the last name of Brewster.
Now, was that included in the height statue at the top?
What did I do? Oh, no, I went too far. I'm sorry. Please bear with me, and I apologize. It's my touch here that is too strong. You're looking at the winning design, so I'm fine. This is the winning design. When after the Indiana government had appropriated and approved the money for the monument, they decided they should have an international contest for the design of this monument. And they issued very strict guidelines. The submission had to be made in a certain format on paper, and it had to be anonymous. There was to be no mention of who the artist was who designed this suggestion. They asked that a sealed envelope be attached to the proposal, and the name of the artist was in that sealed envelope, and that was only to be opened once the winning design had been chosen. They perhaps didn't exactly know what they were looking for, but it appears that they did not want anything that looked Greek or reminding of antiquity. And they also wanted a monument that would really fill the space, which was then known as Governor's Circle. So imagine the surprise when they opened the envelope. This is the design that they chose. And they opened the envelope, and there was the name of Bruno Schmitz, a 29-year-old artist or architect from Germany. Nobody had heard of him in the United States. He was virtually unknown here. And there they were. He had won, and he was trusted with the execution. And I think in the end, I hope at least they were very pleased with the outcome, even though at first I'm sure they had maybe a few second thoughts. So this was a tremendous opportunity for Bruno Schmitz, but he also took something back. He gave Indiana a beautiful monument in Indianapolis, a beautiful center of town, but he also took something back. He came here, and while he lived here, became acquainted with the work of an American architect by the name of Henry Hobson Richardson, who used a very prominent technique of what they call giant rusticated stone slabs. And Bruno Schmitz used that type of construction for the monuments which he constructed in Germany when he went back. So here's a timeline. And the very top is cut off, so please forgive. This is a technical flaw. I have divided that into sort of 3 sections. And the very top above the orange line just shows the year he was born, the years he studied, and the year when he won the Indianapolis competition, which sort of launched his career. So the dates above are not the greatest importance. And the one on the bottom also is not, that's the year when he died. But when you look at the middle section, that is what I wanted to point out here. Winning a design competition is an impressive feat. Bruno Schmitz won the first prize out of 70 entrants. That's a lot and very great accomplishment if you come out on top as number 1. But building this type of a monument is a massive undertaking, which takes lots of time, lots of money, and many hands and talents of various people. So what you have in the middle is 10 lines for 5 monuments. There's one that shows when construction began, and then there's another one that talks about what year it was dedicated. The largest monument, which Bruno Schmitz designed, took 15 years from start to completion. The Indianapolis Soldiers and Sailors Monument took 13 years, and the others 7 years, 6 years, and 3 years. But any way you look at it, it is a very long time. A lot of times adjustments had to be made for whatever reasons, people dropped out, and it's just a very lengthy process, and like I said, a massive undertaking. What makes a Bruno Schmitz monument different is that he designed those massive monuments to fit into the landscape. The monument was not put somewhere and then you landscape around it. He put it into the landscape. And all of his monuments, his 5 major monuments, completely fill the space where they are located. It is, I also would like to mention here, it's a monument or a memorial, and the German word for it is Denkmal. And I love that word, and I hope you will warm up to it too. Because what's a monument? Something big? I don't know. What's a memorial? Something that you're supposed to remember? I don't know. A Denkmal, that has meaning. That literally means think. And it's a command. And it tells the onlooker to think. Look at this. Think about it. Contemplate it. More modern or more recent monuments maybe are not quite as colossal as these monuments, which I'm about to show. I'm saying they try to engage the onlooker in a more personal way. And what I have in mind is the Vietnam War, which many of you, I suppose, have seen, where the onlooker who stands in front of that wall sees his or her own reflection on top of the marble surface with 8,000 names of all those soldiers who perished in that conflict. So I will get back to the word Denkmal and hopefully you will remember. Mal means once. So einmal, zweimal, dreimal, Denkmal. I like that. I like that better than monument. Sorry. Travis, I may need help again. It's not moving. So here is the first monument of the 4 monuments which Bruno Schmitz designed when he got back to Germany. This one has a very German name that doesn't translate. It's called the Kyffhäuser Monument. It is, he won again for all the 4 monuments, which I'm about to show. Each case, he won first prize out of a number of designs. This one, I think it was 58 entries or something like this. So it was always kind of impressive to win first prize. This monument is located in Thüringen, and I will show a map later to give you an idea where these monuments are located. And it is dedicated to 2 emperors, Kaiser Wilhelm, and I don't want to stand in front of it, but I will point to the middle emblem, the gentleman who sits on the horse there, the equestrian statue, that is Kaiser Wilhelm. And then you can also see the statue up there on the top. And underneath that statue is kind of a rounded opening. That's where you will find Barbarossa. So the monument is dedicated to Kaiser Wilhelm I and to Barbarossa. Barbarossa is a legendary medieval king who, according to legend, did not die. He's just asleep in the monument. He's sleeping there, sitting at a table. His long red beard, hence the name Barbarossa, has grown through the table. He's sleeping there. There are ravens circling the monument, and the story goes, when they stop flying, that is the sign for Barbarossa to awaken from his sleep and to come back into a rule Germany as a united country. When I say the monument is dedicated to Kaiser Wilhelm I, that is obviously in reference to the united country under Prussian leadership. Germany was united in 1871 under Prussian leadership, and the King of Prussia was Wilhelm I, became Emperor of Germany. He had 2 titles, very fancy, the King and the Kaiser. So, and the empire of Wilhelm I very much wanted to be seen as the legitimate successor of something called the Holy Roman Empire. I'm giving you a lot of history and I apologize for that, but that's part of it. And if I leave it out, very little of this will make sense. So Germany was part of the Roman Empire long time ago. The Romans had pushed way up into Europe and even Northern Europe. They were in England, if you recall. And in the year 800, an empire was created by then a very strong leader whose name was Charlemagne. Charlemagne or Charlemagne or Karl der Große, as the Germans call him. Sorry. Was given, he offered their protection to the popes, the papacy, They did not have their own army, and in gratitude to that, this empire was known as the Holy Roman Empire of German nation. So Kaiser Wilhelm and his empire, they wanted to be seen as the legitimate successor of that first empire. And the Barbarossa legend very nicely fit into that scheme. I have seen this monument, I have visited it, and my connection to it is that it is located in an area close to where my maternal grandfather was from. It's near Rudolstadt, a very quaint, beautiful little city. And the Duke of Schwarzburg-Rudolstadt gave a signed copy of a Bible to my grandfather, that grandfather, on the occasion of his confirmation in the Lutheran Church. And that's one of my prized possessions. And that same Duke, he presided over the festivities when that castle, that fortress, that monument, that Denkmal was opened. And I said to myself, wow, that's really kind of cool. So, thank you for allowing me to share that with you. That Bible is, of course, over 100 years old by now and very special. Yes. The tradition was that Duke gave a Bible to every boy in that little town every year, I suppose, for a certain time at least. The boys got a Bible, and guess what the girls got? Would you like to guess? A fancy cup and saucer to be added to their dowry. This was a long time ago when things were different and there was no equal rights, and you give him a Bible and me a cup. Well, that's the way it was. Nobody questioned it. So the next monument then is the second one, which was constructed, or which was designed by Bruno Schmitz. Yes? Yes.
So on the timeline before, it said that he started soldiers and sailors, and then there were others that started and some finished before that one. So did he stay in Indiana for the 13 years?
No.
Did he come back and forth?
I don't know that. I don't think he came back and forth. You have to remember. Now, to jump on a plane and go back and forth, and they have red eyes and all of that. Poor Bruno Schmitz didn't have that luxury. He had to come on a ship.
Yeah.
And it's not like a ship went every other day. So I have no idea how long it even took him to be notified and then come over here. No, he stayed. Do you know, Bill, how long he stayed?
It was a very short time.
Yes. And then somebody else was appointed to kind of act in his behalf while he went back to Germany. And I don't think Bruno Schmitz came back for the dedication. And probably, if he didn't, probably because of the difficulty of travel in those days. Otherwise, maybe he would have come back. And I also do not know if this monument took 7 years to complete, if I remember correctly. I don't want to say that he stayed there the whole time, but he was certainly somewhat involved with it. So this is the second monument. It is called Kaiser Wilhelm Denkmal or Kaiser Wilhelm Monument. And we have to separate because there were many of those monuments to the Kaiser. The first one has a name, Kyffhäuser. This one has the name too, if you attach it to it. It is located at a place which the Romans called Porta Westphalica. That is two mountain ranges, not very high mountain ranges, where the Weser River makes its way in between toward the North Sea. So Porta Westphalica is a very prominent location. This monument was also dedicated, obviously, to the Kaiser and to German, the victory of the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. And it celebrates the beginning of the German Empire. If I may direct your eyes to the statue of the Kaiser up there in the middle picture. That is a 21-foot tall statue. And the Kaiser stands there on a pedestal. He is wearing a military uniform, his left hand on the sword and his right hand extended in greeting. I'm sure you've seen that kind of greeting before, but I need to mention that this is something which was copied from the Germans. It was not the same kind of greeting that you saw in the Hitler era. This was extended as the greeting. The Kaiser is wearing a coronation cloak over his uniform, but he's not wearing a crown. He has a laurel wreath on his head, but there is a crown. If you look at the top of the canopy, 150-foot tall canopy above the Kaiser, resting on 6 stone pillars, there's the imperial crown. So he is a crowned head after all. Yeah. This was a very important site for the Romans when they named it Porta Westfalica, and also because they had an encampment there. It was an important site for the Prussians, certainly, because they chose that site for their monument. And this area was at that time part of Prussia. You may think Prussia is the area around Berlin. Well, that's not really true. At that time, it extended way west. And then it was eventually also an important site for during the Nazi regime, when they used forced labor to build massive tunnels under the monument in the mountain for storage of sensitive things and manufacture of munitions. After Germany was defeated after World War II, this area was part of the British zone, and the British occupying forces decided they wanted to blast those tunnels, get away with them. And when they did, the detonation damaged the monument and the foundation. So a few years ago, in 2018, the monument was rededicated. It was extensively refurbished, but they also made some nice improvements. They added a circular terrace, which you can see on that picture on the bottom in the middle. And that terrace has panoramic windows where you can see the whole beautiful area of the mountain ranges and the monument. And there's space for a museum and exhibit and the restaurant. This monument is visible from a distance, and it really commands that whole area and fills the space. My connection to this monument, this is the city where I grew up, and I have visited it many times. I climbed up all those steps. It's kind of hard to see from here, and really love that monument. I'd like to go back and see what it looks like now with that terrace added to it. But again, it's not that easy to get over there anymore. So there's also a very interesting video on YouTube, which Mr. Zelm had sent to me, and I kind of wanted to include it, but I'm not smart enough to know how to add a video to something like this. But if you're interested, I will be happy to send you the link. And it's really helpful to see that video because I cannot show a panoramic view. on a slide, but that video really can. It's all in German, very interesting. And when you see that, you will understand why this is such a tremendous monument. I forgot to mention that this was not bombed in World War II. And why it was not bombed, likely because it's not near a big city, so it survived. And I also forgot to mention that the previous monument, the Kyffhäuser monument, was not bombed because that too is in an area which is sort of isolated. But the previous monument, you would see another picture later, was almost destroyed after World War II. Because that was then part of the East German government, or East Germany, the German Democratic Republic. And they didn't have much use for a monument that honored two emperors. They wanted to raise it and use the metal for something else. And the Russian commander stepped in and said, no, let them keep their monuments. And that's what saved the Kyffhäuser. So there's kindness sometimes from very unexpected sources. Here now is the third monument, which Bruno Schmitz designed. This is called the Deutsche Eck, the German corner. I will show a slide in a minute, which will explain how that name came about. This monument is a little bit different from the others. It's really dominated by that equestrian statue. And that statue of Kaiser Wilhelm was severely damaged at the end of World War II. Some soldiers, evidently with artillery, had a little too much fun and blasted it off, and it was left there, the mangled metal, until it was finally removed. And minus that statue, it was just a pedestal, and it became a symbol for German unity. There are stone medallions with the names of all the German provinces, and it became even more so a monument for German unity when the provinces were added that were lost after World War II, as in East Prussia and Silesia, Pomerania, and so on. And when German unity was finally achieved in 1989, the decision was made to refurbish the monument, and a new statue was created and mounted, and it was rededicated in 1993. I saw this monument, but I did not see that statue because it wasn't there, and by the time it was replaced, I was no longer in Germany. And finally, oh, here's the, sorry. This is, you can see, German corner. This is at the confluence of the Rhine River and the Mosel River. Both rivers are very famous in German history and also for winemaking. You may have heard of Rhine wine and Mosel wine. And the Rhine, the wider river on your left, is of course in parts at least the border between Germany and France. So it's kind of a dividing line. Yeah, and when you look at the monument, you see it right there. You can tell, I think, that it really fills the space. It is a destination in itself, right? Kind of impressive, right? Okay, so then finally, this is the fourth monument which Bruno Schmitz designed. And it is the largest monument which he designed. It is called the Völkerschlachtdenkmal, which translates into Monument to the Battle of the Nations. It is located on the battle site near a city in Saxony called Leipzig. And it commemorates the 1830 victory of over the French army under Napoleon by a coalition of forces from Prussia, Russia, Austria, and Sweden, involving 600,000 soldiers. Almost 100,000 of them died or were wounded during that battle. I'm sure you've kept up with the news, this terrible earthquake which happened in Turkey and Syria. I just read that the death toll has now surpassed 11,000, and that's horrifying. Now imagine 10 times as much. It's mind-boggling. And the wounded in those days likely did not survive. They may have been wounded and then they died of their injuries because medicine wasn't what it is today, and to save these soldiers, that wasn't really so easy. So this took 15 years to complete. It has been called Bruno Schmitz's crowning achievement. It has also been called a massive stone temple to death, victory, and fantasy architecture. It is a tall structure guarded by a massive statue of the Archangel Michael in front of the door. I'm talking about the right-hand picture there, who is, forgive me, he is joined in his vigil by a ring of stone guards around the top of the monument. This monument has 2 floors. On the bottom is what they call the crypt. Though nobody is buried there. Massive stone figures of medieval knights, dead guards of the dead, and masks of the dead. Very somber and very solemn. And then there's a top floor, which is called the Hall of Fame, with more statues, battle scenes, all of that. And then 500 steps going up to an observation deck if you want to climb up there. And there's an artificial body of water in front of the monument, which is called the Lake of Tears. Obviously, in reference to the many tears which were shed there for all those soldiers who perished. My connection, this is the only monument which I have not visited. It's one of my plans to still do that. But my connection to it is that my paternal grandfather was from the city. He was from Leipzig. So, whoops, Travis, I don't like your, I'm sorry. My hands are not what they used to be. So Bruno Schmitz, while he is best known as the designer of massive monuments, and you have had a look at all 5 which he designed, he also did other things. And I've kind of decided to separate all of his work into 2 categories: the monuments, which you just saw, and now I want to focus on the aspects of artist and architect and show you some of the other things which he did. It is just a sampling because some things, I guess, do not exist anymore, and other things, my research has only been what it is. I found what I thought would be interesting and sort of indicative of his many talents. Bruno Schmitz designed a piano. We get away from the big monuments right now. He designed a grand piano and also a poster for a piano company. This piano company is called Ebach, something which, unless you are a pianist, you may not have heard of. I never heard of them. They're still in business. They're still building uprights and grand pianos. This company was founded in 1794, and for their 100-year anniversary, they wanted to have a special instrument to properly celebrate that milestone. And they issued a call for design proposals to prominent artists and architects. And guess who won first prize? Bruno Schmitz. And there is his piano. It's all a matter of taste, right? If you like this or not. I'm sure if you wanted to buy this today, you might not be able to because it might be a little too expensive. Plus, taste. Well, I don't know what it's. I'm sure it's very precious. But taste also has changed. And what was once the cat's yellow may be different today. And this poster which he designed, this company, Zimmermann, I looked it up, is a dealer in Darmstadt, and this helped to promote their fancy pianos. Now here you might say to me, wait a minute, you just showed all the monuments, and here is another one. Yes, there's another one. This monument was dedicated to the Empress Augusta Victoria, who was Kaiser Wilhelm's first wife. I did not include it with the other section, however, because this is not a massive monument. This is very small in comparison, so I think I'm justified in showing it here. It is in Koblenz and was built in 1895. Bruno Schmitz also designed this very fancy house called the Stolberg House for a wealthy family in Cologne. That family owned a chocolate company, and Stolberg is still a chocolate company name today, but you have to look for it. Sometime you might find it, but they have acquired many other brands in between, like Cadbury, for example. And the Stolberg name is not that easily recognizable anymore. But I love this house. I think that is just so fancy and so fabulous.
It looks like the east side of where the Union has.
Is that right?
It really looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said what?
Memorial Union on the UW Madison campus.
Yeah.
It really looks like that.
Really, there's tremendous attention to detail. But if you look at the door in the front there, you see that big S for Stolberg. Can you see that? It's right here. So it's a very, very fancy house and a design by Bruno Schmitz. He also, by the way, designed his own house in Berlin, but I couldn't find a good picture of it. Unfortunately, this building is no longer there. It was raised to make room for other things. I hope not a parking lot. It's a shame. It's a shame. Bismarck, as I'm sure you know, was the architect of German unification or the German Empire. And as such, he was honored with many of those so-called Bismarck towers. And this one was designed by Bruno Schmitz in 1899. It's found in a smaller city in North Rhine-Westphalia called Unna. Typing with your computer, and that was my fault. I turned the page too much. Bruno Schmitz also engaged in a little bit of urban planning. He designed the Friedrichsplatz, the square on the left side. This is in the city of Mannheim. I don't know if any of you may have visited there. Pardon? I was just there. Oh, you were, you saw it. But you didn't know who designed it, did you? See, good thing, now you know. And he designed this fancy pinkish building, which is called the Rosengarten. It is an exhibit space and a concert hall. It's still there today. The building survived, even though it looks like the one on the left is more modern and probably something that was built after World War II.
So it's both pictures, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, you can see it on the top there, and then again on the in the right-hand picture. So here you're going to say to me again, wait a minute, another monument. Why wasn't that included with the first one? And I will tell you why I didn't. I feel 100% justified in not having it. This monument is located in the city where I was born, Halle an der Saale, but it's not big. It's not filling the space. It was just along a street, very nice residential area, but it isn't big. And besides, it survived the war. But after the war, Halle was part of the German Democratic Republic. They had no use for the statue of an emperor that people might still bow to, and they tore it down. I remember it only as an ugly pile of rubble until they decided to build their own monument there, which was not attractive like Bruno Schmitz's monument. It showed a big red flag and kind of a communist paraphernalia. But like I said, it's all a matter of taste and depends on what you want. And that's what they wanted. And this monument is no longer there. Bruno Schmitz designed these commercial buildings, the left one in Düsseldorf early in his career, and the right one in Berlin a little later. Again, I'm not sure if these buildings survived or if they were destroyed. And he designed the German exhibit hall or pavilion at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. Did he come back for this? I do not know. I don't think so, but he got to design it. And the pavilion there, his design is on the right side, was modeled or a replica of a castle in Berlin called Schloss Charlottenburg, which you see on the left. This World's Fair, I'm sure, are you familiar with what a World's Fair is? I don't think we have those anymore, do we? It used to be a wonderful opportunity for countries to go and show their fantastic new accomplishments, latest accomplishments. And this fair was really intended initially to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase, 1803. But it was delayed in the opening, and when it opened in 1904, it became the World's Fair. Countries came there and exhibited showcased their latest accomplishments. There was a palace of electricity because that was a big thing in those days. Transportation, the steamships, the steam engines, that was a big thing. And many, many fancy buildings. And the Louisiana Purchase didn't factor in so big anymore, even though that was also a big event one time. So if you have time, go on the web. There's all kinds of information. That was quite a World's Fair, which they had there. Most of those buildings, however, have since been torn down to make room for other things, and this also is not there anymore. But St. Louis also hosted the Olympic Games in 1904. So they had a very busy time. This is the last slide showing the other stuff, the sample of other stuff which Bruno Schmitz designed. This was a restaurant, one of the fanciest restaurants in Berlin called the Weinhaus Rheingold. I'm sure I don't have to translate that. That's so close. German to English, then you can figure this out. I love in particular looking at that banquet hall. Look at that ceiling over it, this canopy is. I think that looks so airy, so elegant over these beautifully appointed tables. That restaurant also, or it was destroyed in World War II. So here you have seen now Bruno Schmitz's work, at least as far as my presentation is concerned. The 5 major monuments, and then some of the other stuff. And it is only a sample. The 5 massive monuments, that's complete. But here, there are the things. He also designed tombstones and other buildings which are not included. So what this timeline shows is that he really was a remarkably busy man and a remarkably versatile artist, architect, and designer. And when you consider that he lived to be 58 years old, and you really remember that his career did not take off until 1887, you take 1887 to 1913, you have a much shorter time span. And during that time span, he did all of these things. So that's then from the launch of his career, the tremendous launch of his career after he had won the Indianapolis competition, to the time he completed the monument and died 3 years later, a 30-year time span. Remarkable accomplishments, and yet he received great recognition for the 4 massive German monuments because they were all dedicated in lavish ceremonies in the presence of Kaiser Wilhelm II. And you can't get any better than getting the top person's attention or the top person to come to your event. But he still, in spite of all these accomplishments, Bruno Schmitz seems to have been a rather modest man. And I will say that because he did not want a monument of any kind on his grave. He directed that his ashes be scattered into the Rhine River, and that apparently was not allowed. So his ashes are buried at the Kyffhäuser Monument, the first monument that you saw that was dedicated to Kaiser Wilhelm I and Barbarossa. And I visited that monument, but I don't remember seeing a sign or anything. This is where Bruno Schmitz was buried. So he kind of did not want the recognition, I suppose. And that's a good thing. So here's a map of Germany for what it's worth. And I don't want to stand in front of it, but because I'll block you. But here's Düsseldorf, where he was born. And then you see Berlin here, where he died and where he became the favorite designer of Kaiser Wilhelm II. And then you have all the other places. And there's Leipzig in Saxony. Germany, by the way, is divided into 16 administrative units. There's Thüringen. My presentation will be on the website. Maybe that's where you can pull it up and then kind of painstakingly find what you are looking for. Some of the monuments are not on here specifically, like the Kyffhäuser is not. The Völkerschlachtdenkmal, you could argue, yes, there's Leipzig that is indicated, but the monument in the town where I grew up in Minden is not on this map because it's not big enough. You just have to kind of guess where it might be. So here's my last slide. You survived. I gave you a lot of information, and these are the 5 massive monuments which Bruno Schmitz designed. These are the Denkmäler, are supposed to make you think. Take a look at the very first one, which is familiar to you. You have seen it. And then you have the other 4 in Germany. The first 3, the Kyffhäuser, the Porter, and the one in Koblenz at the Deutsche Eck, they are all celebrating the empire, the Kaiser, and German unity. And then the one on the right, the monument to the Battle of the Nations, celebrating the liberation of Germany from Napoleon. Has anybody seen any of these monuments? A few. Were they impressive? Okay. I'm going to leave you with a final thought and a request. Next time you stand in front of a monument, please remember that it isn't a monument. It's a Denkmal. If the Denkmal was designed by Bruno Schmitz, it will likely be monumental. If it was not, it may not be that monumental, but it is still a Denkmal worthy of your contemplation and remembrance and thinking of what that stands for, true to the word of the, true to the meaning of the German word Denkmal. Thank you. And I bet you will remember next time you stand in front of one that you are supposed to think Denkmal.
So it seems like his career almost followed you around in some sense.
Follow
You had,
me around.
well, you had
Yes,
a
in some ways.
grandfather there and a grandfather there, and then you ended up in Indianapolis.
Well,
So, and especially the Bible that you got that was signed by the, when did you put together that you had the Bible and you're in this city and it's the same designer as your
not
grandparents?
until way after I had come to Indianapolis. I saw this monument and it reminded me the monument in Minden, the city where I grew up, the Porta Westfalica. This is what I had seen. And when I looked at this, I, for some reason, please don't get into it too deeply. For some reason, I kind of thought, wait a minute, maybe there is a connection.
And did you have the Bible already by then?
I had the Bible, but I had no idea. And then I went back to Germany much later and went to the Kyffhäuser. And that's where I bought this book. And that's where I discovered, I said, wait a minute. Here's Bruno Schmitz's work, and I don't know if I hear. No. Yeah, there's a monument in Indianapolis. I said, that is just unreal. And then I looked at the other monuments and I said, wow, there's another one. I kept turning the page. I'm quickly.
See, you're strong on the book too, not just my.
And there's the picture of this Duke. No? If you're interested, there's the menu of what they ate when that monument was dedicated. I mean, in writing, and I don't want to really make a joke out of it because that's not fair, but when you have, just like in this country, if you have a dedication and the president is going to be there, boy, that's a massive thing and requires the attention of a lot of people and detail. So when this monument was dedicated, this is what I found. This is the menu that they had. And it's all in this book. And that's when I started. And that's how this came about. So that's why this has been a very rewarding journey of discovery for me. Yeah, because nowadays it's a connection, and that makes it more personal. Otherwise, it's just a thing.
When you saw the picture of the Duke, did you immediately know that was
Yes.
the same Duke?
Yes, yes, because I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born. But my mother and my grandmother always talked about that Bible. And then I went to Rudolstadt, is a very pretty little town in Thüringen. And there's a castle overlooking this little town, the castle of this ruling family. And I visited that. We took a tour. And the lady who led the tour, I told her that I have a Bible that was signed by one of those dukes. And she said to me, oh yeah, that was First Günther. There's First Günther. It was a big thing in that little town. And even though that lady was probably younger than I am, she had heard that. It's a kind of a well-known story. Yeah. So I have really enjoyed seeing this and seeing also Bruno Schmitz's evolution of how he went from one monument to another. There is a little bit of a similarity, if you wish, but they are all different, but totally commanding the sight and totally filling the space and being an entity or a destination in themselves. There's nothing around these monuments that's very close, or at least it wasn't in the days when they were built. I can't speak to it now. I don't know how closely sometimes developments encroach, but they're destinations. And I apologize for my joke about they may not be monumental. You also have, I'm not saying you, I'm an American citizen. Y'all have very interesting monuments, especially when you go to Washington, D.C. And if you have seen the World War II Memorial, that is a massive monument, but Bruno Schmitz didn't design it. So I can't take any credit for that, but that is a massive monument. Very impressive. I saw that, and I will never forget that. I was with a German friend, and the guide who kind of led us around, or he was our guide. We walked through there on our own, and he came up to us and said, "Joey, seeing the monument?" And we said, "Yes. Do you know anybody who fought in World War II?" And we both said, "Yes, we do, but they fought on the wrong side," which left this poor guy completely speechless and devastated. He never thought of that option. So, yeah. When you think of all the wars that these monuments represent, and the many people who perished, who died in miserable circumstances, you ask yourself, why? What did we accomplish? What have we learned? Nothing. So, thank you.
Should we just look?
They were, no, I've been following them. I answered them.
Oh, okay.
They were, part of it was when they couldn't hear. But no, there was one.
Books, drugs, and drugstores. You see in here, second Wednesday of March. And don't forget, take one of the magazines if you like.
Yeah, it was interesting to read